Hello, friends, and welcome back to Reiki Women Podcasts. My name is Michaela Daystar, here with Bronwen Logan and Carrie Varela. Today, we're continuing our series on working through the Reiki precepts. We've done several previous episodes talking about specific precepts and what they mean to us personally, how they operate inside of the system of Reiki, and just insights that have come from bringing those precepts into our daily life. It's our belief that the system of Reiki works best and at its intended purpose when we integrate it into our day to day life. And the precepts is the primary way that we can do that. So I'm really excited to continue this conversation working with just for today, be true to your way and your being. So, friends, when you work with this precept, what comes up for you?
Well, I'll just say that it's Gyo O Hageme is the Japanese, which we're translating from, and be true to your way and your being might be a translation that people aren't totally familiar with, in that it's not a direct translation of those words. So, if you were looking for a direct translation, then Gyo would be practice, and Hagime would be diligent. So those are two sort of direct words that we often work from. And I know when I first learned the system of Reiki, I think that it was do your work honestly, which once again is interesting. As work we could take as practice and honestly uh, um, diligently. They're sort of different. They have a different feel, don't they? You
Yeah.
know, and then to take it to a different level, which is be true to your way, uh, and sometimes it's be people use be true to your way and your being. So that once again has a totally different take, and it would be interesting to see how we feel that the system of Reiki has come to using the different translations.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for me, I worked with that first translation that you spoke to, or the second translation more that you spoke to, work diligently or work hard is sometimes the way I heard that translated. And for me, out of all of the precepts, it's the most grounding precept
Mm.
in the sense, well, I guess just for today is also very grounding, but this idea of like, okay, well, after we go through, the work that the precepts dictate to us to release anger, to release worry, to be filled with gratitude, then it just like that precept just really grounds me into the work of today. And I think for the last 10 years, 15 years as a Reiki practitioner, I've really used it as a starting point and an ending point. Like at the end of the day, it's a starting point for me at the start of the day to be like, okay, well, I can ground myself in what's the work of today and just work hard at it. And when I can tap into that space, like I feel like my momentum, my energy is almost limitless.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, if I can take a moment to acknowledge what my work was that day, it's also quite like it feels good, because sometimes it feels like, in our list and modern life, our to-do list is like literally pages long. Mine is literally pages long. And so when I can like look back and reflect on, oh, these are the wonderful things that I was able to accomplish today, it gives me that sense of accomplishment and fulfillment, and it makes me look more closely at cultivating that sense of fulfillment in my daily life. And I think without that self-reflection, sometimes we can just get caught in this hamster wheel of doing with no end. But when we can take those mindful moments to step aside, to look at whatever we did, that we put our energy, our effort into. And it doesn't have to be work in the traditional sense. It could be, and as I've reflected on it, it's sometimes deep emotional work. It's the work of healing a wound. It's the work of something completely outside of actually earning money, like being a parent, um, showing up, being present to the people I love. All of that can be work. But as we talk also to the more poetic interpretation, I think, of that precept as being true to your way and to your being, I'm always on the search for these like one words, a phrase, a sentence that immediately like just strike you right in your heart. And to me, being true to your way is one of those phrases and intentions. And as I practice it, almost immediately connects me into my heart space, which I just adore it for that capacity of like communication and the human language to speak so eloquently, like right to the point, right to the heart. And so I don't know, it's such a guiding point for me in that sense too. But also when I share it with others, and as I had a chance to share it with others, it almost like you can just see this spark go off in people's eyes to give themselves that freedom and permission to be true to themselves. And as I've had the opportunity to work and share that beautiful teaching with others, I'm just always inspired by the transformation that almost immediate transformation it can provide.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love holding both of those translations. And I tend to cycle between them depending on what I need in the moment, as part of the flexibility of the system. And, you know, just for today, I am diligent was one that felt really challenging for me, that I had a lot of resistance to at first, because my way in life tends to be a little bit inconsistent, a little bit scattered. I tend to not. I tend to struggle to do things on routine and like on, schedules, right? And that's how I was interpreting that, right? Like stick to a schedule. And I think for some people it can mean that. But this is one of these beautiful instances. We're holding the kind of meat part of the precept, being diligent, with the ultimate precept, just for today, has been such an incredible point of transformation for me in my practice, because today I can be diligent with whatever it is that I need to practice, my Reiki practice, all of the things that you named, Carrie, all of the things that I really want to bring my full and true self to. Just for today, I can do that, right? And then tomorrow I can make that choice again. And so being able to hold both halves of that statement, just for today I am diligent, has really actually helped me temper this perception that I have of myself as being scattered and inconsistent. It's actually helped me to be more diligent, but in a way that was gentle and organic, rather than like coming from a dictate, like you must be diligent, right? Which is how I was interpreting it originally. It became much more invitational, much more gentle, much more of a way to integrate my genuine desire to have an ongoing and robust relationship with my Reiki practice consistently over time. It became an entry point to that. And I really appreciated kind of that mindset shift when I remembered, or really, took on the full phrase that we really are working day by day, moment by moment, which is really the only way we can do anything. And then when we shift the focus or expand the focus to just for today, I'm true to my way, or true to my way and my being, we get to kind of put that diligence into practice in specific ways. We get to look at a situation on a case by case basis and think, reflect what decision here, what action here is true to my way. And then, I've worked with that one so much with myself in terms of what specifically do we mean by that? Because if we think about our way as our habits, our way of being in the world, our behaviors, our belief systems and patterns, we can quickly see that there's a lot inside of that we don't necessarily want to be true to, right? I don't want to be true to my addictions. I don't want to be true to, behavior patterns that formed out of fear and self-protectivity. So how do we distinguish what is truly our way that we are going to be true to? And in that reflection, it's like we put it inside of the context of the rest of the precepts. Our way is how we are in the world when we are unattached to our fear and our anger, when we're grateful, when we're compassionate for ourselves and for others, when we're connected to, or when we're, truly remembering or feeling in our body that sense of interconnectedness to all of life that we have a responsibility towards. And so that shift in perception really helped me settle into the interpretation, be true to my way, because it relieved me of the anxiety of like, am I being true to a way that I don't actually want to nurture? That's not actually good for me to nurture. And when we settle that inside of the context of the rest of the precepts, it becomes very simple. It becomes very straightforward, right? I know that I'm being true to my way when these other conditions are present, right? That are so clearly spelled out. And so that's a little bit about my ongoing journey with the fourth precept, which for me has been the one that I've worked the most in a contemplative way. Like, I really need to come to understand this in a new way, right? I've wrestled with that one more than the others, and I value it quite highly for that tussling that I've had to do.
Yeah, and I get why that is the case, because also with the different interpretations, it's a bit like, so what does it mean? And I actually have a translation here, which I liked your question just then about, what are we being true to? And there is a translation of Gyo here, which says that it's a lifetime activity, which is what Carrie was talking about as well. But there's more to it. So a lifetime activity undertaken to reform oneself. So it's got that little caveat behind it, which is saying this is something that we do all the time, and we're doing it for a purpose. Yeah? And the purpose is to not be, as you were just saying before, Michaela, so to not be angry, to not worry, to be grateful and compassionate for others. I thought that was a really lovely, hello, beautiful pussycat. I thought that was a really lovely way of seeing it. And, but well, we were just saying then to reform oneself, being, not be angry, to not worry, to be compassionate to ourselves and others. So that idea that what we're doing for the purpose of training ourselves, changing ourselves, working on ourselves, but we're doing it not just for ourselves. And I think that's an important part of that too. So that being true to our way is actually, because it does sound a little bit egocentric, doesn't it? It could sound egocentric, yeah. But if we look at it as the work that we do on ourselves is then going to, domino out into the world. And so we're actually doing the work for everyone.
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah, and that's such an important example of why we need to hold the full context of the system of Reiki as a system, right? And not take individual pieces out of context. Because as you said, if we're just true to our way and the way that we're picking are behaviors that truly are self-centered, right? Are designed to get us things that we want and need with disregard for the needs of others, or maybe even our own greatest good. There are numerous examples of that we can find in our lives. I can certainly think of a number of ways of being that I have had in the past, and that maybe I still have, that were I to be true to them and cultivate them, would put me in a very self-centered, very selfish, and ultimately destructive right way of living my life. And so we need to hold that in the context of the rest of the system, which begins with the concept of interconnection, that we are all connected. And so if I'm being true to myself, I'm being true to the greatest good of all of us. And what does that look like? It looks like being unattached to anger and fear, being grateful, being compassionate to myself and to others. And it's really critical that we hold that in context, because that's, I think, one of the things that can happen that's problematic when we take a system of practice, a spiritual system, a healing system, that perhaps we don't have a deep, long-term connection to, either because we're from a different culture or we didn't grow up with it or whatever the case. And, we pick the pieces of it that we like and we leave the rest, right? And there is a certain sense in which, we can be discerning about, there's not every piece of a tradition, is going to be still relevant in a particular time period or be right for us. But we really need to begin with an understanding of all of the pieces and how they fit together. Because if we just, go in and pick the parts we like and leave the rest without that level of discernment, we can be heading into some territory that the system was never intended to take us into. And I think this is one of those examples.
Well, Gyo can also mean austere. Yeah. And so, it's a bit like what you were saying about diligent, how that can sound tough, right? And hard. And sometimes it is tough and hard. But on the memorial stone for Mikao Usui, it says that he practiced Shugyo. So Shugyo. So GYO is it's an austerity practice, right? And it's like a really hard practice. And sometimes, so we can look at the founder of the system as having actually put his effort in to a hard effort to get to where he was. And so therefore, we have to do that too, because if we wish to practice the same practice. So it's not necessarily easy. And it is and as we all know, it's just an ongoing thing. So it's not something that you just achieve and it's done and there's nothing more to think about. And I think that idea of it being that lifetime practice explains that.
Yeah.
I think also too, there's this idea of the way is also really embedded within Eastern mysticism. And the concepts like yin and yang speak to the path of the way or path of the Tao. And so I always lean into the philosophy behind this symbol yin and yang as also guidance within this precept. So you look at the symbol of the yin and yang, the outer rim of the symbol is said to signify consciousness. That consciousness is the bowl, the essence, the ether that holds the light and the dark. And within, the darkness, there's always a little bit of light. Within the light, there's always a little bit of darkness. But that middle line through the yin and yang is said to signify the way. And so for me, too, as an extra tool to help guide that inquiry, that self-inquiry about what is my way and how do I stay true to my being, which isn't my ego, and it isn't my addictions, like Michaela mentioned. But I think another layer that I tend to add in when I practice this is that being true to my way is a way of balance and not swinging too wildly into the extremes of any one emotion, experience, part of myself, that it's a way of wholeness and completion. And so that's also something that's really helped me, decipher. But like I said, it's so funny because it's it can strike you, maybe the first time you hear it strikes so deeply into the heart, but it does take that extra contemplation to look at it from a lot of different lenses, from a lot of different days, emotions. I think it's particularly helpful for healers because I was speaking with somebody recently, and she was like, I was taking a hot Pilates class, and it was just a room full of sweaty people, and we're all working out really hard. And the people who tend to go to that kind of class, the teacher spoke to it. She's like, "You guys are type A." type A people, right? And you're doers. You go out and you do your thing and you sweat in your hot Pilates classes, and like you probably don't spend much time. I would assume they probably don't spend much time in contemplation. But this lovely teacher was trying to promote my yin class, which is like completely on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's like this relaxing meditative class. And she was like, you type A people, you need to go to this kind of class, which I don't know if we would classify myself as a type B person. I'm not really sure if there is a type B, but I know that I'm not completely a type A person. I can be true to my way of being, that I'm not like, just totally dictated by my to-do list, and I'm a doing kind of person. But I think as a type B person, I'm a very feeling and emotive type of person. And so I ride the waves of my emotions on days where I don't feel particularly focused or in integrity with everything that I'm trying to do professionally or personally. I need to take these steps back in order to get back into my center and back into my way. And usually, like the precept, I've kind of already alluded to this, but this precept, being true to your way of being, is the one that kind of I take with me out of my meditation. It brings me out of that state of meditation, and I can be with after I go through whatever internal state that I need to do to find my center, to find my balance. I can step into my day and being like, okay, so what's the work to do now? What can I be diligent about? What can I focus my time, my energy into, that would give me the most progress?
Yeah.
That line, just one thing, that line in the yin and yang, it's not a straight line.
Yes.
Right. So that whole thing of, we always talk about it, firm and flexible. And
Yes.
you're just saying how you live your life, and that's being firm and flexible. It's like we need to move. What did you say? Ride the wave of your emotions. Yeah. So, you're moving with that. You're not trying to hold on and be fixed, but be flexible and move with what is happening in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love these examples. And, for me, again, back to the importance of bringing these things into our day to day life. I love examples of what that looks like. And so I just wanted to share one and invite the two of you to think about other, specific times when this precept has served you well in your daily life. And what came up for me when I was thinking of examples was just this past weekend, I was at a Reiki retreat, 4-day retreat that, with a group of people that I really like and care about. And, I'm an introvert, and that means that being in a close, intense social setting for 4 solid days away from home can be a lot, it's invigorating, but it's also exhausting. And, after a full day of being in the work, naturally folks wanted to socialize and hang out. And I wanted to do some of that. But at a certain point, I became aware that I was exhausted. And they invited me to go do another thing off of the campus. And I was very aware that I did not want to go. Like, I wanted to curl up on the couch with a book by the fire, like needed to recharge. Absolutely. And like my way in that moment was to settle down, to ground back down, to recharge my energy, to be quiet, to be reflective about what I'd experienced during the day, and to just, relax with a book. But the part of me that, has dealt with abandonment issues and not feeling like I belong, and, all of that story, that's part of, some of the work that I deal with. In those situations, always screams at me to continue engaging, right? It's like, nope, you need to keep staying connected or you're going to get left behind. I love the modern slang term FOMO, for fear of missing out. I definitely have that when I'm not being true to my way. It's like if people are going off and having a good time without me, my belief system that I'm not enough and I'm going to get left behind, like, can get activated. And in the past, I've done all kinds of things I didn't want to do because of that. And it was this moment of like this choice point of being aware that I don't want to go, but I want to go because I don't want to feel left out. And I chose to stay and to be true to myself. And that's a small example of truly doing the right thing for myself in that moment, the compassionate thing to myself. And to your point, Bronwen, that when we care for ourselves in a way that is true to the path, that is in integrity with the rest of the precepts, then that ripples out. Because I know that what can happen is when I push and I go and do the thing I don't want to do when I'm exhausted, I'm not always the nicest person to be around. Right? I can get snappy, I can get sarcastic, I can get irritated with the people around me, which is not good for them, and it's not what they deserve. And so it was a moment of realizing that my practice has changed me in that way, because this is something I've done over and over and over again in the past. And, it felt like true compassion to myself to just not fall into that pattern again. And when we can get into that pattern of shifting our normal responses to be more in alignment with the precepts, then that can work on bigger and bigger and bigger issues, right? Bigger, more consequential, with greater impacts on our life and those lives of others, when we notice those choice points and we make a choice that is truly, with compassion, true to our way. And so I just wanted to share that kind of down-to-earth example of applying this precept in our day-to-day.
Good on you.
Yeah. It's a good book too. Nice and cozy.
Yeah. So you're definitely a type B person, because that's the difference. Like a type A person would never take that time. They probably wouldn't read a book. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there you go. And when you get to be true to your way, then everybody else is like, book, curl up, let's see the fire.
And then someone else is going, oh, I wish I'd done that.
Yeah, there's another guy there who's a knitter, and he had gotten this old-timey sock knitting machine that like really rapidly knits the tube of the sock. And he's like, yeah, I think I'm just gonna bow out too. And so he's knitting socks in the corner, and I'm reading my book, and it was just like a perfect moment. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm doing right now.
We're Reiki retreating over here.
Yep.
Oh, there was one other aspect that I was just looking at about this that had to do with, the more historical aspects as well, which are always interesting just to see, I think you mentioned that before, Michaela, finding that being in the roots of your practice, so being in there and, not moving too far from where the actual system sits, and knowing that we are practicing the system of Reiki, right? So the idea that there are Buddhist precepts, and at the time of Mikao Usui's life, there were the Meiji Emperor changed society from a Buddhist focused society back to a more original Shinto based society, which meant that, those people who were Buddhists, and there were lots of them, were not openly practicing Buddhism. And so it has been said that the precepts were a way of pointing out the Buddhist precepts without actually being Buddhist, right? Yeah. So, because at that time we know that there were lots of people who did write precepts that were very similar to the Reiki precepts, and they're not specifically Buddhist, but just for different practices, ways of being, and ways of being true to the practice and themselves. So if we look at Buddhist precepts, there's the 6 parameters, and the 6 parameters are, I'm just going to read them out, because I feel like we can see within the 6 parameters this one particular Reiki precept. I think we could see quite a lot of them, but this one particular one I think is really reflected in it, and it's quite interesting. So there's generosity, and that's that sharing of who we are, yeah. and doing our practice, sharing that. There is morality. Now, I think that's a really interesting one as far as practicing and practicing diligently. There is a moral cause behind that, because we are doing it for the good of ourselves and for the good of others. Persistence. Well, that's the diligent aspect, isn't it? So keeping at it, continuing with it. It's that lifetime aspect. Patience links in beautifully with that, because, if we become impatient, then we maybe try to take shortcuts, or we just stop altogether, and uh, we lose training ourselves. We lose that aspect of of working on ourselves to be I could say a better person, but that's sort of like going outside of ourselves, but it's more of the remembering who we are still, isn't it?
Yeah.
We come back to that. So remembering who we are. So being patient with ourselves, and not being too hard on ourselves in that sense. And then the next one is concentration. So being able to focus. And as we know, a lot of the practices within the system of Reiki are about focus. Josh and Kokuho, I think the precepts all together actually are about focus. So, being able to, when we meditate, it's teaching us to focus. And that is so that we don't get distracted by all the crap in our lives, and we can actually choose to live healthy, happy lives with others. Yeah. And then the last one is wisdom. So if we're being true to our way, it seems like the ultimate wise path. It's us choosing to discover that wisdom within ourselves, and be true to that. So those are the 6 parameters, and I think they're really quite beautiful, and I can see them reflected in a lot of the precepts, but I think specifically in this one precept, it's sort of directing us to live in this, in a world that is, what were we saying before, where we are undertaking to reform ourselves, where we are training ourselves. And these are the things that we want to train ourselves in.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that practice of looking at the precepts alongside the paramitas and the Eightfold Path. It's something that I often do in Reiki classes, and it leads to so much connecting of the dots around all of these different concepts, right? So, like you just did, right? This one leads to that. This is how this one's connected. This supports this one. And, again, one of those places where there's a beautiful simplicity, right? It's very simple to see these connections and not easy to put it in practice in our life on a daily, regular, diligent, persistent basis. And, again, that incredibly powerful tool of just for today, that we just have to do that right now.
Yeah.
Right? We don't have to worry about doing it forever for the rest of our life. We just need to worry about, we don't need to worry about it at all. We just need to rest into it right now. And that's just such a reassuring way to walk a path, right? Yeah, one step at a time.
Yeah, I think back to just an example from our daily lives. Well, first of all, Bronwen, I just really appreciate you putting that into context. I think that is really poignant, and it speaks to those deeper soulful truths that arise when you really reflect on this precept in depth. There is that tendency, as we've been talking about, to land on kind of like a shallow level. And then I feel like, we can see how deep these concepts really reach into the Eastern culture and Japanese culture in particular. And so in the West, as we practice Reiki, we don't have that kind of cultural context. So there's like this kind of, I don't know, this sense of naivety when somebody says, "Oh, be true to your way." It's just like, oh, kind of flippant, like, okay, well, I feel like I want to go surfing today, so I'm surfing and I'm going to do this. And But that being said, I don't think we should be judging what other people's process are, and just letting, the truth speak for itself. But for me, I think that Reiki is one of those things that really empowered me in the direction where my heart wanted to go. And I felt like this calling deep inside me when I first discovered Reiki to become a Reiki practitioner, to become a Reiki healer, and to become a healer in general. That soulful life mission kind of bubbled up inside me through the context of practicing Reiki daily, moving with the energy of Reiki, doing yoga as well. All of those things kind of blended together, and that did not come easy. Like I have a master's degree in environmental science, and there's like so many parts of myself that are like, well, Carrie, in your being, why aren't you like more lean towards something that's like, financially secure and there's a blueprint for your success. Like you could go work in the government and, every 7 years or so, like, be working at a new pay grade and all of that stuff. And well, maybe because my own energy, my own soulful dynamism, my own ego, my own wounds, all of those things kind of pushed me away from that path and pushed me into this more open, expansive, creative, entrepreneurial space of being a healer. And it's something that, like, honestly, whenever I come to that question of be true to your way of being, like this, there's this inner schism I feel inside of myself that is like more logical, grounded, easy, or potentially easy. I wouldn't think it that way probably if I was living that kind of path in my life I could have taken. Instead, I'm riding on this wave of the heart, and that's always been, something that I've leaned into. And the wisdom that I feel from that is that I'd like to share to you and to our community is that it's safe to follow your heart. And I don't know completely how it's all going to work out for myself, financially, all of the things. And I feel that deep pain inside of anybody who feels called to be a Reiki practitioner or to be a healer, to be an entrepreneur, or to work for themselves, or to want to, be a positive force in humanity outside of the system, let's say. And, but I found that there is safety in that. And even though it does stretch me beyond my comfort zone, beyond sometimes my family members' comfort zone, but that I found my way in that. And I found my being in that. And I'm not saying that's true for everyone on this path. I think it's totally fine. A wonderful thing to do to have a more, steady income in a different field, perhaps, or a related field that supports you also as a Reiki practitioner. I see a lot of people doing more than one thing professionally. Some people might feel inspired to go all the way and be just a Reiki practitioner, or like many Reiki practitioners have lots of different modalities that they teach or offer. But I don't know, that's the heart stirring that it always takes me to this kind of fundamental question of like, what do I want to put my energy into? Where do I want the course of my life to go to? And I don't think anybody can give you those answers, but that you can lean in and listen to where you really want to go. And that we can set all of the teachings aside in order to really listen to that wisdom and lean in and trust it. And when we do, the teachings come along to help us illuminate that path and keep us going on that soulful path, if that's where you're going.
I really appreciate, Carrie, you emphasizing that doing what you just described is not easy, and that there's parts of it that feel easier, right? Because we're more aligned, we're perhaps feeling more flow, and there's parts of it that are not easier. And I really resonate with that. I mean, I think I've shared before that I spent about 12 years working in higher education and working in social justice leadership development in colleges. And there were parts of that job that were absolutely true to my way. They were true to my values. They were true to my, upbringing, true to what matters to me, what I think is right. Helping people to build their skills and ability to make the world a better place. was really important to me. But there were many parts of that job that were absolutely not true to my way. They were not true to my skill set. They were not true to the way in which I want to work with other people. Not true to my pacing and my timing with how things need to get done, working inside of an academic calendar. And it was an incredibly painful and long process of, first of all, coming to that realization that even though there were parts of that work that were deeply important to me, very much true to my way, there were these other parts that were making me very unhappy and making me very ineffective, in certain ways, ineffective in that job. It's a very long and painful process to come to that realization and then to choose to do something about it and to figure out what the something is, and similar to you, coming to this place of, I think my calling is to continue to help people, to support people, to do what they're meant to do in the world, to make it a better place, but to do it in this completely different way. And as I stepped into that experience of being an entrepreneur, of, doing Reiki and other practices my full-time work, and running into new challenges and new difficulties, new pain points inside of that experience, realizing that, in order to continue being true to my way, I couldn't abandon some of the other pieces of that work. And so I needed to be diligent, and I needed to do the hard work of bringing along those values and those components with me into Heartscapes, into my Reiki work. It would be much easier in a certain way to just focus on, I'm here to help people feel better, because they're dealing with some kind of pain, to kind of do healing work in that way. But and to not figure out how to articulate the piece around social justice, leadership development. That's still incredibly important to me. And so figuring out how those two sides of me, merge into a viable business, that can sustain me, has been incredibly difficult and incredibly rewarding. And so now, 5-6 years into that process of, after leaving my job, and then the several years before that of sitting with this dissatisfaction, and the pain of that, I feel on so much more solid ground. I feel like, the image of being that mountain with that stable base and being able to rise tall from that foundation, more and more feels like how I'm living my life. And it has been extremely hard and so worth doing, right? So worth being diligent in that process over a long period of time. To figure out in nuanced ways, layer after layer, what does it mean to be true to myself? What does it mean to be true to my way? And making a shift in that direction and settling there and then reassessing. Okay, there's still pieces that are not aligned. There's still pieces that aren't quite in integrity. How can I bring those pieces in? How can I let other pieces go? And it's an iterative process. It's a cycle. It's a spiral, right? It's a symbol one spiral to get further and further and further into the truth of what my way actually means, just in this one sliver of my life, of my profession, right? And then we can do that in all of these other aspects of our life, our relationships, our parenting, and how we're tending to the land that we live on, how we're in relationship with our neighbors, how we're in relationship with indigenous peoples on our land. Here in the United States, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and formerly Columbus Day. This was a choice that our nation made, I would say, to be more true to a certain set of values that we like to think of as our way, to move away from celebrating a colonizer and more towards awareness and acknowledgement and celebration of the people whose land this is. It feels really powerful, actually, just now in this moment as I'm saying this, that we're having this conversation, today. Carrie and I are in the United States, Bronwen, you're in Australia, so you may have some equivalent experience there. But when we work with this precept, what does it mean to be true to our way individually? Then that can lead us to think, what does it mean to be true to our way collectively? And I feel like shifting from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day is a version of us as a nation being more true to our way collectively. And yeah, I think that's something that this can lead us to.
Yeah, a greater consciousness of,
Yeah.
of life for sure. Yeah, I was just thinking about, what you were saying and myself and the being true to your way. And that line, that yin and yang line through the middle, I think is just such a potent visualization of it's like, life is everything else, well, it's all life, but life is there, and then we have this line that we follow through it, and we take, at different times, we sort of absorb things from around us, and we practice different things, and I've done a lot of different things in my life, and I'm sure you guys have too, like as you were just saying. And I've always known that, whatever you do, it's going to be of value in some way, and that we can get very in our heads about, being true to our way. I sometimes I sometimes think it's more a feeling thing, that we just I don't know, as I move through anyway, I can feel parameters, and it's maybe the parameters of that line, so that I stay on that line, but the parameters of what is going to work or not work, we know inside ourselves. And the more that we become conscious, the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we have that feeling of whether we are doing the right thing, if you like, or not, right? So being able to sense that is very much, I think, a part of our practice, that it teaches us that wisdom, of what is more appropriate or not, for us to be doing at any moment. And because I just really feel in my life that it all, I love seeing all the different things that I've done come into play at different times. But I don't sit there going, I have to use every aspect of my life that I've done. These are the things, they naturally come to us. And we need to, if we practice, I think then we have a greater consciousness about what we're doing, and we will be on that, we will be being true to who we are, simply by being in the moment, and really immersing ourselves in our lives. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. The little ant that's sort of wandering around and doing its thing, it's not actually going, how do I be true to my way, right? It's not doing the mental things that we tend to do. Yeah, it knows. It has a very clear focus, and it knows what is the right thing for it to be doing at any moment in time. And that's what we need to be. And I think that we can distract ourselves often with lots of too much mental exercise sometimes, and actually just really sitting back into, I think you both said that today, but sitting back into yourself, and really just going with the moment, and drawing on all the wisdom that you've accumulated to this point, is really where we need to be right now.
Absolutely. I wanted to put a little asterisk on the piece that I just said. That just occurred to me because it's Indigenous Peoples Day in California. I said in the United States. California, the state that Carrie and I live in, made this choice to shift this holiday, but not every state in the United States has done that. And I just wanted to make that correction, partly because we should be accurate in what we say, and also because we Californians kind of have a bad rap for being a little bit self-centered and thinking that we're the whole rest of the country, and yeah, we're not. So today, California, Indigenous Peoples Day, and other places it's Columbus Day.
You're big enough to be your own country. So.
That's how we feel sometimes, but you have to be humble. We're just California. Yeah. So this has been a really engaging conversation. I really enjoyed the places that this conversation has gone, and I hope that those of you who are listening have been able to reflect on either your existing relationship with this precept, if you have been working with it before, if you are new to the system of Reiki. I hope that this has been a fertile and enlivening introduction to this fourth precept within the system, and that you can see ways in which incorporating this precept in connection with the others into your daily life can be really powerful and beneficial for your path, for your way going through your life. We'd love to hear your own reflections, your own examples of times when you have been true to yourself, times perhaps when you've struggled with that, questions that have come up, and anything else that you'd like to share with us in the comments below. And if there's other folks in your life who would benefit from this conversation, we invite you to share this episode with them and see what comes up in your conversations. So thank you so much for being with us on today's episode. Until next week, thank you so much. We love you. Bye-bye.